Hey, what's going on, Facebook? So early in the morning here, and I'm obviously up and can't sleep. And I was just thinking about some things that I speak about on a regular basis. I mean, people who know me know that I've, for quite some time, been an advocate for children, for the safety of children, um, particularly as it pertains to spanking. And so I wanted to go over a couple of things um, that um, just crossed my mind sometimes in the wee hours of the morning. Um, so oftentimes I hear people say um, that they were spanked as a kid and they turned out fine. Um, it should be noted that you turned out fine because your parents did some things other than spanking, not because they spanked you. Which means, in spite of your parents hitting you, they did do some other things that kind of made you a decent person that really they could have done without the spanking. The spanking it's always about the parent, it's never about the child. The child is the subject, it is the learning object. But let's talk about the idea of people saying that they turned out fine and why this is I don't know what you call it. I want to say a distraction, but it's not a distraction. It's sort of a bait and switch. Not a bait and switch. I'll think of the term. But the point being is that if a person is to say to you that they were hit as a kid and that they turned out fine, um, they are leaving out everything else that was done as well. So, I mean, parents who love their kids, they take care of their kids, they feed their kids, they love their kids, they do a lot of things. They kind of discredit all of the other things that they do for their children to reinforce the what they feel in regards to hitting the child. So they want hitting the child to have more value than every other thing that they do for the child. So people are being dishonest. And I know they're being dishonest because from a scientific perspective, there was really no way to test whether or not, at least, I mean, there is a way to test, but they didn't test whether or not it was the hitting of the child that actually made the difference for the child. And so what I mean by that is for African Americans, like 89% of African American parents hit their children, right? But obviously 89% of African American children don't turn out fine. And so if hitting is the one thing that makes the difference, then it should make the difference regardless of everything else that a parent is doing. But the reality is that there are a set of values and practices that parents have that determine whether or not a child is going to turn out fine in spite of the trauma that even their parents may impose upon them, right? So if you have a parent who's very attentive to you, that is loving to you, that is caring to you, but then they hit you as well, right? Um, well, the loving and the caring may overcome the effects of the hitting. So it is not the hitting that made the child better. It's the loving and the caring and the nurturing that the parent gave that made the child better. But the parent doesn't want to feel the guilt for hitting, so they use the hitting as the key factor and the difference of the development of the child into an adult human being. But the reality is it was everything except the hitting, so that the child turned out fine in spite of being hit by the parent. And so these are the lies that people tell, right? Because if it were the hitting, like from a scientific perspective, you would be able to say, okay, all of these parents hit their child, but this parent did this as well, and then these parents did this, and then these parents did that, and then you will be able to see the difference across the scale of parents that hit their children. But we don't. People always talk about how they turned out fine, but they never talk about those who didn't turn out fine and why they didn't turn out fine, because the spanking is the overarching thing, right? That's what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect our investment in hitting our children. And I'm saying that it's something else that is facilitating the success of your children, not the hitting. Sometimes you encourage intelligence in your children. You send your children to school. You want your children to get good grades. You feed your children well. You give them a nice home environment. Like all of these things will overcome that traumatic experience that the children are having under your authority. And so you think that you need to hit them. But the reality is some things you just got to let go with your children, right? Um, some things you have to let them understand what the actual impact is on you. So instead of hitting your child, express to your child how frustrated you are, and express to your child that you can't have a normal relationship with them in the state of frustration, right? And then explain to them and give them examples of when they are frustrated with you, and how you have how the child may have some difficulties doing what you would like for them to do because of their frustration. Um, and so stop saying that you were hit and you turned out fine. The reason you turned out fine is not because you were hit. You turned out fine because your parents did some other things that impacted you in a way that overcame the hitting. Because you do have, listen, you can have a parent, right, that is neglectful of their children, that hit the child in their life only one time. So you got one whooping in your life, but your parent neglected you, right? Then that one whooping is going to have a greater negative effect on you than a child who had an attuned parent that was loving and hit them, right? So the point I'm making is that then the hitting then has to be seen as inconsequential. The hitting doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in a sense that it's like me saying, I turned out fine and my parents fed me chitlins. Like the chitlins have nothing to do with me turning out fine, right? It was some other things. The fact that I played 3 sports in high school, the fact that I was very athletic, that overcame the fact that I had chitlins as a kid. And so that's the point that I'm trying to make. Stop saying that you got spankings and that's why you turned out fine. Stop saying that. It's a ridiculous statement, because if you calculated the number of times that you were hit, then there are a number of children that were hit just as many times as you, and they didn't turn out fine. And is the hitting really isn't. I'm saying it. The lack of parenting is why children don't turn out fine. You can have a good parent that hit, and the good parenting overcomes the hitting, so the hitting is inconsequential. But in most cases, hitting children has a negative impact um, on most children and their development, because it compromises their reasoning capacity, right? You want children to learn the lesson. You want them to be able to reason. You want them to be able to use logic. And hitting, there's nothing logical about hitting. It gets you it gets you an instant result, but it costs you as far as the capacity. Um, and so hopefully you can understand that, and hopefully you will pass this message around to other people so that people can stop using it. It's a ridiculous argument. I mean, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but it is. It's really a ridiculous argument. Your parent has to do more than hit you to understand life, to get you to be able to teach you. Like it's difficult. Put it this way: you've had at some point in your life a great teacher, like a great teacher. We all had a great teacher. That teacher didn't have to hit us to get us to do what they wanted. Now, we could give all teachers the right to hit us, the obligation to hit us, to make us act right and behave right. But for some reason, I don't think the great teachers would ever have to do that. And people always say each child is different. I know in a classroom, interestingly enough, they have anywhere from 15 to 30 students, and they never have to hit their kids. The bad teachers, even if they had the capacity to hit their students, the hitting of the students is not going to overcome them being bad teachers, and the good teachers will never have to hit your child to get your child to learn, and so neither will you. So let us have some conversation around the reason we're actually hitting our children. It has nothing to do with discipline. It has nothing to do with the development. If your children are doing good in spite of the fact that you hit them, it's because you did some other things good. And there are very few parents who do everything bad, but there are some parents who don't do enough good for their children, and then hit their children, which increases the problems that their children will ultimately have. So tell me what you think about that.